On the morning of my 27th birthday, I stood in a quiet kitchen filling the dog's water bowl while my parents and brother were already on a flight to Vegas. The faucet hissed as I adjusted the temperature more out of habit than need. Max's bowl clinked against the tile as I set it down, and he trotted over, tail thumping, lazily, none the wiser that the people who owned him, and me, I supposed, had decided he was my responsibility now. The refrigerator hummed in the background, a soft mechanical heartbeat that made the house feel more occupied than it was. Grandma Iris used to say, "Some folks celebrate your birth by showing up, others by showing you who they are." Her voice came to me like a breeze through an open window, gentle but undeniable. She'd passed 5 years ago, but in moments like these, she lingered. I checked my phone. Nothing. No calls, no texts, not even a calendar notification from Mom like she'd sometimes sent for birthdays she forgot. There was a group message from last night, though. Mom had sent a photo of Tyler beaming at the airport. She added, "Vegas, baby. Your brother deserves it. Can you check on Max for us?" No mention of me, not even a thumbs up emoji. I made myself eggs and toast, plain. The toaster popped halfway through a podcast about retirement planning, one I wasn't even sure why I listened to anymore. I'd started it when I was caring for Grandma full time, hoping one day to build something for myself. The irony was stale now, like the bread I'd used. After breakfast, I grabbed the mail, mostly coupons. One envelope addressed to someone named Eleanor, wrong address. I held it for a moment. Grandma's name. Of course. I slipped it into my coat pocket. I'd walk it over later. As I turned to go back inside, my eyes flicked to the rear cottage. Mr. Brent's place. His porch light had stayed off the past 2 nights, which wasn't entirely unusual, but the curtain hadn't shifted either. He usually waved from the garden when I took Max out. Quiet man, paid rent on time, never asked for anything. Still, something tugged. I walked the short stone path to his door and knocked once, then twice. No answer. I crouched to slide a note under the door, scribbled on the back of a grocery store circular. "Hi, Mr. Brent, just checking in. Hope all's well. Let me know if you need anything." Celeste. The wind picked up on my way back, the kind of late May breeze that smells like warm pavement and grass clippings. Max barked once at a squirrel, then curled into a patch of sunlight on the living room rug, tail flicking in his sleep. The rest of the day unfolded quietly. I vacuumed, organized the drawer where old batteries and takeout menus went to die, and finally sat with the lemon tart I'd bought yesterday from Maple Diner. I lit a candle, just one, and sang quietly to myself. Max perked up at the sound, then went back to sleep. I blew out the candle before the wax ran over and made the same wish I always made, to feel like I mattered. By mid-afternoon, I'd pulled out one of Grandma Iris's old boxes from the hall closet. It still smelled faintly of lavender and attic. Inside were clipped recipes, old Reader's Digest magazines, and a few church bulletins from years past. I sat cross-legged on the carpet, flipping through the pieces of a life too quietly lived. She'd been more mother to me than my own. I missed her most on birthdays. The sun began its slow descent behind the rooftops. I fed Max, reheated leftover chicken soup, and turned on an old black and white game show just to hear someone else's voice. The house felt heavier after dark, like it remembered things I'd rather forget. A little before 9, my phone buzzed. I hesitated before answering, recognizing the number. "Sweetie, can we talk later? We're watching Tyler ride a mechanical bull." Mom's laughter was distant, swallowed by background noise. A shout, a cheer. Then the call dropped. I stared at the screen for a long time before setting the phone down, face down on the table. I took out the trash just before bed. The night air had turned cool, sharp with the scent of distant grills and blooming honeysuckle. As I reached the back gate, I saw movement near the cottage. A figure leaned against the post, legs trembling slightly. It was Mr. Brent, unsteady, pale, under the porch light. "Sorry to bother," he says, "but I think I need help." Mr. Brent collapsed on the porch steps before I could even find my shoes. I had turned for the door the second I saw his legs give way, still holding the trash bag in one hand, wearing mismatched socks. Max barked once, more curious than alarmed, and followed me out, his nails clicking on the porch behind mine. Hang on, I said, hurrying toward him. He was half sitting, half sagging against the banister, one hand clutching the rail and the other bracing himself on the wood. I I think I stood up too fast, he muttered, breath thin. You're pale, I said, kneeling beside him. Let's get you inside. Can you walk? He gave a small nod. I helped him up slowly, one arm over my shoulder, and guided him back to the door of the cottage. It took effort. He was lighter than I expected, but the weight of worry made him feel heavier. Inside, the air was cool and still. The cottage smelled faintly of paper and old coffee. A quilt sat folded over the arm of a recliner, and a classical record, Debussy, I think, had stopped spinning on the player. He slumped into the chair with a sigh. I ran out of my meds a week ago, blood pressure. Thought I could make it till payday. You can't mess around with that kind of thing, I said gently, heading to the kitchen. I filled a glass with water and brought it to him. Do you need to go to urgent care? He shook his head. Just dizzy. Happens when I skip the pills. I nodded slowly. Do you have a pharmacy? Sing's, just down the hill, but I owe them. They won't fill it until I settle the bill. I knew Sing's. Everyone in Maple Ridge did. Mrs. Singh had run that little pharmacy since I was 12, when she and her husband moved here from New Jersey. She remembered birthdays better than most families, and had once diagnosed my strep throat faster than the clinic. I'll go, I told him. Do you have the prescription? He hesitated, then motioned to a drawer. I found the bottle, noted the refill date, and tucked it into my pocket. Back soon. Mrs. Singh looked up as I pushed open the door. She wore her usual sweater vest and cat-eye glasses, flipping through receipts behind the counter. Celeste, she called, you're glowing today. Someone falls in love or just has good skin? Neither, I said with a smile. Actually, I'm here for Mr. Brent. He's out of meds. Said he owes. Her face softened. Poor man, quiet as a cloud. We've kept the refill ready in case he showed up, but we do need the balance cleared. How much? She typed, clicked, and said gently, $179. I reached into my purse. I hadn't planned on dipping into savings this month, but something about Mr. Brent, his hesitance, his pride, hit a familiar chord. I paid, took the bag, and turned to go. Mrs. Singh leaned in. That man used to tip in 20s, always bought chocolates for the nursing aides. Good soul. Back home, I found him still in the recliner, watching Max snore by the window. Here, I said, handing him the bag. Don't skip tonight. He looked up, startled. You didn't have to do that. I know. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I'll pay you back. Don't worry about it. Focus on getting better. I made soup, simple chicken and wild rice, and carried it over 20 minutes later. He was already nodding off again, so I left it with a note. Rest. No strings attached. I returned to my kitchen, poured myself tea, and stared out the window. The yard was quiet. Distantly, I could hear someone mowing their lawn. Later that night, I logged into my bank app and transferred $400 to my parents' account. The rent they'd expect, even if I didn't explain why. At 9:40 p.m., the phone rang. Hey, hon, Mom chirped. Just checking in. How's Max? He's fine. Great. So listen, Tyler's thinking about summer MBA courses. Real good program in Florida. And well, he needs a little support. You know how it is, I braced. We were wondering if you could help with tuition. There it was. And, we noticed that deposit you sent. $400. What was that for? For rent, I said. Same as always. A pause, then brightly. Of course. Just checking. We hung up 10 minutes later, after a few more pleasantries about the Vegas weather and a vague mention of winning something at the roulette table. I wandered to the kitchen to rinse my mug. Max blinked at me from his rug and thumped his tail twice. The next morning, I found a small envelope resting on the kitchen table. No stamp, no address, just my name in a neat, firm script. Inside was a clean, cream-colored business card, and beneath it, written in blue ink, "You're in the wrong career." The business card was crisp, minimal, and bore the name of one of the top firms on the East Coast. I held it between my fingers at the breakfast table like it might vanish if I blinked. Rosebridge Capital. No title, just a name, Wallace Brent, beneath it an email and a number with a Manhattan area code. I'd known the man as quiet, polite, and, until recently, unwell. Not someone who'd slide credentials across a table like poker chips. I turned the card over, blank, save for one line in the same firm script. You're in the wrong career. Max pawed at my leg for toast crust, and I dropped a piece absent-mindedly. My fingers itched to search the name online, but something held me back. Instead, I folded the card in half, tucked it into the back of my planner, and reached for the kettle. Grandma Iris used to say I had a good gut. She meant instincts. Said mine had kept us afloat more than once when the hospital bills piled high, and the nurses said she wouldn't last the month, but she did 3 more times. Still, I wasn't sure what my gut was saying now, just that this card didn't feel random. After lunch, I pulled out the resume I hadn't touched in over a year. It was still titled Celeste Hanlon Final 3. Doc X. The formatting was off and the font was too small. It listed jobs I'd outgrown and skills I hadn't updated since 2019. The cover letter read, like something written at gunpoint. I took a breath and opened a new document. It took the better part of 2 hours to rework it, editing out outdated references, adding a few of the community budgeting sessions I'd volunteered for through the library. I even included the summer I'd helped the Maple Diner owner, Trudy, restructure her books after a sudden audit. She still gave me a slice of pie at home every third Thursday. I debated sending it. My thumb hovered over the attach file button in Gmail for a long minute, but something about the neatness of that business card, its quiet assurance, nudged me. I hit send. That evening, I walked to the diner. It was early enough that the dinner rush hadn't hit, and the booths were mostly filled with regulars reading newspapers or sipping black coffee. Dottie, the waitress who'd known me since high school, gave me a wink. Hun, you want the corner seat or the one by the pie case? The pie's too tempting. I'll take the corner. She brought over a mug of coffee before I even asked, sliding a creamer packet across the table. I'd brought a notebook with me, mostly as a prop, but I found myself doodling small to-do lists. In between sips, I let my eyes drift to the window. Across the street, the town library's porch light flickered. A kid rode past on a bike, streamers trailing behind the handlebars. Celeste? I looked up. Mr. Brent stood near the edge of the table, slightly steadier on his feet now, wearing a buttoned cardigan over a collared shirt. Mind if I join you? I gestured to the seat. Not at all. He sat down gently, folding his hands. I owe you an explanation. You don't, I said. But I'll take one. He smiled faintly. I used to be with Rosebridge, 22 years. I left after my wife passed. Couldn't focus. Burned out, really. Sold the apartment, came here because Iris, your grandmother, was the only person who ever spoke to me like I wasn't broken. I blinked. You knew her? Briefly, once at a conference. She corrected my math. Nicely. I laughed, the sound startling even me. You remind me of her, he added, except you hide it better. We talked for nearly an hour. He asked thoughtful questions, never once giving unsolicited advice. When the pie came, Dottie insisted it was cherry my favorite. May I see your resume? He asked near the end. I pulled a folded printout from my purse and handed it to him. He read it silently, lips moving ever so slightly. Then he made 2 quick marks with a pen he pulled from his coat. This should be at the top, he said, circling my financial volunteer work. And don't downplay this diner work. It shows initiative. You helped someone in crisis. You were eavesdropping, I teased. He smiled. Call it observation. As I tucked the marked resume back into my bag, he said quietly, I know someone at Rosebridge. I'd like to send this along. I hesitated. Are you sure? You open the door by how you treat people, he said. I'm just holding it wider. We stepped outside together. The air had cooled, but not enough to need a jacket. He walked ahead a bit, slower now, but steadier. On the way home, my phone buzzed. A text from Tyler. Hey, Venmo me $300. Laptop issue. Dad says you'll get it. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. As I reached my street, I spotted movement near Brent's cottage. The flower bed by the front steps long neglected, was now freshly turned. A row of marigolds stood upright, their gold and rust petals catching the last light. Brent was crouched beside them, holding a small trowel, hands dirty but calm. He looked up, caught my eye, and gave a wave. He didn't say a word. 2 weeks after my birthday, my parents invited me over. For dinner, they said. No reason, they said. I knew better. The text from Mom had landed just after lunch on a Thursday. Steaks on the grill Sunday. Just us, like old times. There were 3 exclamation marks, a smiley face, and not a single reference to my birthday, or to the fact they'd been MIA for it. Still, I knew the game. Warm up the stage, set the table, and deliver the task between dessert and dishes. I replied, sure. What time? When Sunday came, I debated not showing up, but some stubborn part of me wanted to see it through, to finally stop playing the dutiful daughter, if only for one night. The house looked the same as it always had: faded blue paint, flower beds meticulously maintained by Mom, and the same leaning mailbox that had been crooked since I was 14. I parked at the curb instead of the driveway. The air was humid, thick with the scent of grilled meat and citronella candles. Mom opened the door before I could knock, like she'd been watching from the window. She beamed. Celeste, you look fantastic, so polished. That blazer is very executive. I smiled faintly. Clearance rack, $42. Well, it doesn't look like it, she said, stepping aside. Come in, come in. The house smelled like garlic bread and store-bought pie crust. The good dishes were out. Real silverware, cloth napkins. I couldn't remember the last time those had made an appearance without a holiday attached. Dad was on the back patio, tending to the grill like it was a delicate surgery. He gave me a wave and a thumbs up through the sliding glass door. I nodded back. Tyler was in the living room, sprawled across the couch in athletic shorts, half watching a game and half scrolling through his phone. He looked up briefly. Hey. Hey. The small talk was predictable. The weather, traffic, how the neighbors finally cut down that tree that leaned into our yard. Mom commented on the price of eggs. Dad mentioned a car dealership commercial he hated. No one asked about my birthday. No one asked how Max was doing, or if I was still at the same job. It was all surface tension and stale air. When we sat down to eat, things shifted. The table was set for 4, a pitcher of iced tea, a bottle of mid-range wine, and a bowl of overdressed salad. Mom had even lit candles. Dad cleared his throat. So, tell us about your work. Still at Apex Financial, right? I nodded. Yeah. Management something? He asked, like it was a pop quiz. Corporate strategy. I got promoted. That's great, Mom said, smiling wide. You've always been so steady, so practical. Tyler was just telling us he's looking into MBA programs in Florida. I turned my head. Tyler shrugged. Just keeping my options open. Investing in myself. Mom reached for the wine. But of course, those things aren't cheap. There it was. The slow drum roll before the request. Dad folded his hands. We were thinking, just an idea, you might consider co-signing a loan. Nothing big, just enough to help get Tyler started. I blinked. You want me to co-sign? Just to show support, Mom added quickly. You wouldn't have to pay, he's going to work hard. You're asking me to put my credit, my stability, my name on the line for Tyler. They exchanged a look. Tyler took a sip of tea. Well, Dad said, you've always been the responsible one. I put down my fork. Do you know what a cosign really means? I asked. It means if he can't pay, I'm legally obligated. If he skips a payment, my credit tanks. If he drops out, I carry the debt. And given his track record, Celeste, Mom snapped, that's not fair. Isn't it? You always bring up the past. We're trying to move forward. You mean like the time I had to pay rent at 18 while Tyler got a used Mustang for Christmas? I asked. Or when I asked for help with college and you said there wasn't enough, then sent him to Vegas for his 21st. Dad sat back. That's ancient history. Not to me. Tyler scoffed. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Am I? Silence fell over the table. The only sound was the gentle clink of Mom refilling her glass. Mom set it down slowly. We just thought you'd want to support your family. We're proud of you, Celeste. We are, but family means being there for each other. I looked at her, looked past the makeup, the staged warmth, the years of polite neglect dressed up as sacrifice. If you can't support your family, she said coldly, don't expect us to pretend you're part of it. And there it was, the line in the sand. After years of dodged birthday calls, silent accomplishments, and favoring the sibling who never lifted a finger, they'd drawn it for me. I stood, quietly, slowly, placed my napkin beside my half-eaten steak. That's okay, I said. I'm not pretending anymore. I didn't tell Brent about the dinner. I didn't have to. He poured me tea the next morning without a word and said, "They took too long to see you." I sat across from him on his porch, steam rising from the mug between my hands. The birds were busy that morning, robins hopping along the fence, a jay dive-bombing the feeder. Max lay at my feet, tail thumping lazily each time Brent dropped a crumb from his buttered toast. The silence was gentle, familiar, comforting in a way my family's house hadn't been in years. "You sent it, didn't you?" I finally asked. He looked over his glasses. "The resume?" "Of course." "To who?" He sipped his tea. "To someone I trust. Lydia Parker, HR director at Rosebridge. She owes me a favor, though she'd never admit it." I felt a flicker of something between nervousness and gratitude. "You didn't ask me first." "No," he said, "but you needed someone to believe in you before you talked yourself out of it." I traced the rim of the cup. "What if I'm not what they want?" He smiled. "Then they don't deserve you." The interview was set for the next day, a Zoom call with Lydia and two members of her team. I spent the afternoon tweaking my lighting, propping my laptop up on a stack of gardening catalogs, and testing audio with Tara, my old college roommate. She still called me C, still ended every pep talk with "don't let them talk over you," like we were 20 again, crouched on the dorm floor, eating pizza and rewriting cover letters. When the time came, I put on my best blazer, the same one Mom had complimented with surprise in her voice, and logged in. Lydia was sharp, warm, and precise. She asked about risk portfolios and ethical investing. I answered clearly, trying not to over-explain or hedge. The other two asked more technical questions. I caught myself smiling when I spoke about rebalancing Trudy's diner finances during COVID. They nodded, took notes. It was over in 38 minutes. "You did great," Brent said later that afternoon as we sat in his sunroom. "I could hear it from the window." I laughed. "You eavesdrop a lot." "I prefer supportive presence." We worked together for the rest of the afternoon, repairing an old garden bench he'd pulled from the shed. It belonged to Iris, apparently, Grandma's favorite place to sit after dinner. I remembered it, now that he mentioned it. The chipped green paint, the way she used to tap the armrest while telling a story. Brent sanded the wood while I painted. We didn't talk much. We didn't have to. That evening, I made a simple stir-fry and brought over a plate. He answered the door in slippers and a vintage Phillies t-shirt, hair damp from a shower. Max sniffed his ankle and approved. "You didn't have to," he said. "I know." We ate in his kitchen, surrounded by windows and ivy plants and hanging pots. A radio played old jazz, softly in the background. When we were done, he pushed an envelope toward me. "What's this?" "Offer letter," he said. "They sent it while you were in the shower." I opened it with shaking fingers. Mid-level strategist, full benefits, remote friendly, salary double what I was making. Start date, July 10th. I began, but nothing came out. "You earned it," he said simply. We toasted with root beer, his idea, and split the last two oatmeal cookies I'd brought over last week. When I got home, the house felt lighter, like something had shifted. I changed into sweatpants, lit a candle, and sank into the couch with Max snoring beside me. I was halfway through a crossword when my phone buzzed. It was an email. From Mom. Subject, "We need to talk. It's about Tyler." Urgent. I didn't pick up the call, but I listened to the voicemail, and it told me everything I already knew. Mom's voice came through the speaker in a tone she reserved for emergencies and manipulation. "Hi, honey. I know things have been tense, but we're really worried. Tyler's in trouble, financially, emotionally. He's overwhelmed. The loan fell through. We thought maybe you could help us get back on track. He's your brother. We're family. Please call me. No congratulations for the new job. No, we're proud of you. Just a request, framed in urgency and wrapped in guilt. I deleted the message and set the phone down. Outside the window, the evening light had softened the whole street, washing the rooftops in gold and quiet. I stared at the porch swing that had come with the house. It still creaked even when no one was sitting in it. Later that night, I pulled out a small card from the drawer and scribbled a note. Start somewhere, that's how I did it. I slipped it into an envelope with a check for $50. Not 500, not 5,000, 50. Enough to buy groceries or pay a phone bill. Enough to say, I see you, but not enough to say, I'll fix it. I walked to the mailbox at the corner and let the envelope drop in without flinching. The next morning, Brent and I sat on his porch again, this time with lemon tea and a plate of warm scones I'd tried baking. They were slightly overdone. He didn't mention it. He looked thinner, a little more tired. The decision had been made. He was moving into assisted living next month. A small place, not far, with gardens and afternoon chess games. He said it without sadness, only clarity. I don't want to be alone when the next dizzy spell hits, he said, and I'd rather choose the move than have it chosen for me. We spent the afternoon packing books, rows of classics, financial tomes, and the occasional mystery novel. He gave me 3 to keep. Iris's copy of A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, a leather-bound journal with only 2 entries, and a slim poetry volume with notes in the margins. Her notes. I held it in my lap like something sacred. Later, we sat in silence again, watching the wind stir the trees. He reached for my hand. You're going to be okay, he said. I nodded. I think I already am. That weekend, I bought a fresh planner, a set of file folders, and a cheap but comfortable office chair. I labeled a drawer July 10th start and stuck a sticky note inside. Day 1, be who Grandma thought you were. When Sunday came, I stood on my porch, suitcase packed, Max leashed and panting excitedly. My rental lease was ending, and I'd found a small cottage near Rosebridge HQ, close enough to walk to work, far enough to start fresh. I glanced back once before locking the door. On the table sat Grandma Iris's teapot, cleaned and polished, ready for a new windowsill. I'd almost given it away once. I was glad I hadn't. The road was quiet as we drove. Max curled beside a box of cookbooks. The sky ahead was blue, with a few streaks of white like brushstrokes. I felt calm, not triumphant, not bitter, just... Sure. My phone buzzed once in the cup holder. Another message from Mom. I didn't open it, not out of spite, but because I had nothing left to give them. No more explanations, no more loans, no more versions of me they refused to see. Some people wait a lifetime to be chosen. I chose myself. Sometimes, the quietest changes happen in the smallest moments. A hand reached out with no conditions. A door left open with no expectation. I didn't reclaim her worth with grand gestures, but through one kind act, one honest no, one deep breath at a time. It's easy to judge a life by the polish on the surface, but what we miss when we do is the resilience that grows in silence and the goodness that doesn't ask to be seen. Kindness, given freely, has a way of circling back, not always when we expect it, but always when it's needed most. If this story stayed with you, perhaps it's a quiet reminder what you give to the world matters even when no one is watching. And maybe, just maybe, the smallest gesture today is the first thread in someone else's becoming.